What is up, everybody? Welcome to Jet Reviews. Today we are reviewing the next, in my bold prediction, timeless anime made in 2026 of this year. It's only got 2 episodes right now. It's called Daemon, I believe that's how it's pronounced. Daemon of the Shadow Realms. Am I overhyping this show just a little bit? No, I'm not. I almost guarantee it because of 2 really big factors. Number one, this show is made by Hiroma Arakawa. This is the maker of Full Metal Alchemist / Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, depending on what you got introduced to or how old you are, right? So, man, listen, here's for those of you who don't know. So most of y'all, if you've been in any kind of anime conversation of what's the greatest of all time, you've heard something like this. Naruto literally defined a generation. Talk no jutsu doesn't even mean that much, bro. Attack on Titan is easily the most well-written, choreographed show that has ever hit cinema or animation. But Eren wasn't even that interesting of a character. My Hero Academia has some of the most complex storytelling and character development ever done on screen. Deku cries too much and Bakugo's just a simple angry brat. Dragon Ball Z literally defined a generation and defined anime in the Western world. That might just be true. All right, but my point, seriously, is that listen, when it comes to anime, you're in all these different conversations. You got the Demon Slayers in one corner. You got One Punch Mans, wherever those fans are at. You got something from every corner. But when somebody walks in the room and says, man, you know, one of my favorite shows, it's Full Metal Alchemist. You'll watch the whole room take a deep sigh and say, the Elric brothers. Yeah. That's what we're talking about today. We're talking about the author of that show that can silence an argument, basically come back and make a new show that I think has all the potential of the original that we're talking about. Different world, different characters, different concepts. This isn't some spin-off. This isn't some same story 5 years later. This is a completely new story that has all the fingerprints of the same mind that made what most of us loved, regardless of when you watched it. And if you haven't watched it, shame on you. You need to go fix that right now. Leave this video. Go fix that. So I said I had 2 reasons why you were watching this show, and that was a lie. I don't have 2 reasons. I only had 1. 2 was just to make you listen to the first one really hard. So let's hop into the show and talk about why I actually think this show is brilliant and what it's doing really well. All right, so for those who don't know, spoilers for episodes 1 and 2 of this series, and also random spoilers for Full Metal Alchemist as I compare, because I will be indiscriminately talking about Full Metal Alchemist or Brotherhood however I feel like it. Also, if you haven't seen this episode or you don't care about spoilers, I don't care. Don't be the kind of person who watches shows or animes and has really strong opinions about stuff because you watched a bunch of reviews and you've never actually seen the show yourself. Go take the time to watch the show. It's really good, and they put a lot of work into their animation and storytelling. So go support that by watching the show. So we're talking about episode 1 right now, which is called Asa and Yuru, I believe is how the main characters' names are pronounced. Main character being Yuru, Asa is the sister, which we didn't know yet. All right, so some things I think this first episode or pilot episode does extremely well that is really underrated are 3 things. It's the foreshadowing of a bigger world, it's the misdirections within the episode, and then I forgot my third one. Hold on. Oh, right. It's the dysfunction. It's that little bit of dysfunction that's in the episode that kind of makes you suspicious of deeper themes, right? First is the broader world. You have this like country living. It feels like it's set deep in the past world. They farm, they hunt. This is how they live life. Except our main character looks up and sees dragon trails, is I think what he calls it. We would know those as jet streams or aircraft streams coming back. At least that's how you recognize it. But they call it dragons. You don't have a reason to think really otherwise, but that does look familiar to us, right? And so I think that was a really important kind of tip off to like, there's a lot of world to explore. Now, little did I know we'd be exploring that world the very same episode. I definitely thought that would be like a Attack on Titan-esque kind of feeling where you kind of live a whole season in a world and then you kind of find out later the vastness of this world is being explored later and has been impacting the story in ways that are bigger than we could ever know. That is not what's happening. You get that feeling immediately episode 1. So I love that, but they do show hints of it within it, and I think it's a sign of how big the world really can get if the hints we get answered so quickly. Arakawa is showing signs of competence in a way that I haven't seen in a lot of shows, but I really, really love it when I see it. And I think it's because of what she does. So we get introduced in this introductory scene to two twins that are born, but in this state that is clearly not to be desired by the village. We see the grandma of this town while they're giving birth to twins, and she's like, "Hold on, don't do this. If you give birth to twins right now, it's going to be a problem, right? Whether this is a curse, a blessing, or just way too much power for mortals, we don't really know yet. But I think one thing that Hirakuma Arakawa is really good at setting up is initial inciting incidents that make you watch the whole series. Full Metal Alchemist started the exact same way. You watch the brothers trying to do something with alchemy that clearly is costly, and you get invested without really understanding the magic system, the world, or what's at stake for real. But you're still really invested. I know very few people who saw the very first episode of Full Metal and didn't end up watching the last episode because the first episode and everything going on builds on itself so well. And I think this has that same momentum. So I think the misdirection is really good though. You see some twins being born. One has white or blonde hair and the other has black hair, and it's night and day. That's their like dichotomy, that's their destiny. And so when we get into this new scene, we're introduced to the main character who has the blonde hair, and he gets a friend who has black hair tagging along. And it turns out that's not actually his brother. We go on to walk up the village, and somebody says, "Hey, Yuru, you need to go meet your sister." And so he goes up to meet his actual sister. It's not a big deal, so don't think that this is like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever seen, best writing ever. That's not really what it is, but it shows that like they're using every single factor to kind of mislead or guide the story in interesting ways. And so I just thought that was a really cool touch to say, oh no, this isn't really the sibling. It's actually a sister. This isn't even the real sister. It's actually the person we never would have suspected, which is the person ransacking the village. So the other thing that I thought was really, really interesting about this show is that dissonance. I'm not sure what the word quite is that I need to be using, but it's this feeling of the story's not quite adding up in all the ways it should be. And what I mean by that is you have these twins that are basically cursed or born for destinies that are clearly not meant for normal people in this very normal village. And so you get this idea that they're probably going to get the Naruto treatment, right? They're demons that the village can't even seem to reconcile or look at because they don't belong here. They're cursed. Keep them in a cage somewhere. And that's not what you get. We get introduced to this first character, and he is beloved by the town. He's loved by the people. He's got friends. He's admired. He's a hard worker. Even the grandma seems to like him. And so you get this feeling of like, it's a very interesting strategy as a writer. It's one thing to create tension by saying something and then having that play out later. It's another thing to create tension by setting up something and then not having that play out. That actually makes you more tense. My thought when I saw the village was really cool with someone that we already know is destined is, huh, do they know that he's what he thinks he is? Or are they hiding it themselves? Like, what's the deal? Is he Harry Potter and kind of like he's from a world, but everyone's keeping it under wraps? Like, I didn't know what the deal was until we get to the sister who's in a cage and you see, like, interesting. The sister is in a cage. Nobody knows except the brother, and he seems to be okay with this. Loves his sister, but there's not even really the slightest effort of trying to get her out of this situation, more so that I will stay with you through it, which means she must either have insane potential or he's been brainwashed out of this world, or both. One thing is super interesting. I'm going to throw this prediction out there now just because I kind of see it coming. Maybe. But it's that Yuru, our main character, might be kind of cracked. Like, yes, he's a competent archer. Yes, he seems to have a wisdom about him and a wit about him. and some character about him that I really like. But I think he might just be like ignorantly strong too. He's not, he just happens to be using skills that don't show that at the moment. But there's a moment, a little small moment, but when they're going to race because the barrier's been broken, the village is being attacked, and they need to get to the sister as fast as possible. They get through the sinker. They start trying to pick up rocks from the secret tunnel, and Yuru seems to just be tossing rocks to the side, trying to get to his sister. Call it country strength, call it big brother strength, whatever you want. All I know is the friend goes to pick up one rock and is struggling. He's and drops the rock. And so these rocks might not be as light as we were led to believe by our main character touching them. I'm just curious if that's going to come up later. You know, like 6 episodes from now when he gets cornered, his bow breaks, and some monster tries to punch him. Is he going to catch the fist and say, yeah, I'm actually that dude, not just the archer? Or am I just tripping? And it actually just means his friend is like wildly weak and there are no gems in the village. You know, I don't know. The other thing, and maybe the most interesting thing of episode 1, is I'm gonna call her Gobble Girl until I learn her actual name. I'm sure she'll be important later. But yes, this girl, by being present in this show, introduces so many things about herself and the world that I think is super important. Number one, she is almost like a misdirection inside of a misdirection. For one, she is designed like she comes straight out of Full Metal Alchemist. I'm so sure that she's like an Elric sister. Like she looks just like Edward Elric. I'm pretty sure she snatched his jacket before she came into this series. And I almost immediately trusted her because I'm like, oh, you look so much like everyone that I gobble. And now she's biting people's heads off, right? I was like, oh my goodness, this is not an ally. This is not a friend. And I'm like, man, she is killing innocent villagers, right? That's never okay. But I'm sure she has a line. I'm sure she won't cross into killing women and gobble. Women are now gone too. I'm like, oh, but she does have a line, and that line is children. And I think that's such an interesting place to draw the line, not just for the character, not just to some ambiguous morals that she has, but it's what innocence might actually be in this show. As we get more and more revealed to us, I'm gonna save that. Stay to the end of the video. Basically, yes, Gobble Girl gets introduced, and she is super interesting as a character. As a power set, she's the first one to kind of introduce more than just we're getting attacked by a militia, but we're getting attacked by a militia with some capabilities that are not normal. All right, so episode 2 is called Left and Right. And I think this is properly named because we finally get introduced to the gods of this village called Left and Right, respectively. And they are very interesting characters in their own right, but we're also exploring this broader concept of, oh, this isn't just a village that's caught in the past that's getting attacked by militia. There is also a magic system at play. And now we have a counterbalance to that idea, even though we already knew that. We knew these kids were destined for something, but now we get an idea of why people are after them. All right, this second episode, though, is kind of what I personally call the flip. This is where a lot of things flip and start to make sense. One is the brilliance of making our character uh, a kind of village isolated individual. I think that's such a good call as a writer. This kid is from the country, and so there's two things that he needs information on. It's the city and the modern life that we're actually used to living today, which is probably going to mostly land as humor as he goes to explore this new world, like the vehicles and other forms of transportation, city lights, and how infrastructure works. I just think those things are going to be interesting to watch him explore. It's fun, it's new, and it gives good reason for dialogue that's not going to feel forced. The other thing is, as the magic system needs to be explained, he also needs information on that because even though he has insane potential, he still needs to be trained and taught. So I think just putting him as a person who knows nothing but is excelling in competence and character means that he's going to do really well in the show, but right now he doesn't know much. And I think that's super interesting, especially because his sister apparently is the exact opposite of him now. We have no idea what her character actually is. She seems like a good person deep down, but at the end of the day, she has been introduced to this very more complicated world earlier than he has. And so that bond is going to be interesting as their world of differences and their sibling closeness conflict and converge. I think another thing episode 2 explores extremely well is not only left and right as more than just puppets, they are individuals who have wills, independent wills of each other, even if they have similar groundings. But I actually am interested to see them as a dynamic. I think they're a really cool pair to be paired up together. And I think this is something our writer, Arakawa, Arakawa, I think she does this really well. That's something I know Full Metal Alchemist gets a lot of praise for, is there is no character in that show that is not likable, relatable, or understandable. And I think the same thing is happening here. In 2 episodes, I don't think I saw a single drop of incompetence. Out of anybody. I think everybody's coming from their own perspectives, but they're thinking well. I think it feels very grounded in a lot of ways. And speaking of grounded, episode 2, I think, sets the stage for something that I appreciate a lot, which is wounds and damage will last. Like, yes, this is happening under the medium and some of the tendencies of anime, but those damage sticks in this show. If you get shot in the leg, you need to recover. If you get shot in the arm with an arrow, that arrowhead needs to come out. That idea that, like, ooh, damage is sticking around in this show, I think is such a needed thing. And it's not to say to do it the other way is wrong. For example, One Piece is one of my favorite shows of all time, but they are notorious for not being able to die. It doesn't matter if your skull gets cracked in, it doesn't matter if you get uppercut, it doesn't matter if a city gets leveled by a bomb that you were actively carrying. I don't think that's the case here. I think they established very early that real world damage is what we're talking about, and recoveries will also be talked about too. So, unless somebody explicitly has a power that can heal or do something like that, we're talking about real rehab, real doctors, real crutches, and real stitches. Like, I think that's going to be a thing in this show. And I've really appreciated that about Full Metal Alchemist, and I think they're keeping that consistent here. I want to make some predictions here, and I think the last part of this episode is a great way to segue into it, which are the 2 foot soldiers that get left behind in the barrier that can't leave now. And I think what they're going to explore, which is going to be so interesting because this world leaves so much space, is the nature of this actual village. From the from our perspective, at the very worst, it seems like the grandma is the guilty manipulator and maybe a couple powerful people at the top. But the villagers have been largely innocent. And I think what this world is going to be challenging is the idea of really perspective, because we're coming from a perspective of our main character. And so we might not like the grandma for manipulating the kid, because ultimately it turns out that the sister was a puppet just to keep him in place. And this other sister all of a sudden seems to be rightfully angry at the village for lying to their brother and keeping them as pets or puppets or whatever they were trying to manipulate to be. But I think this world is way more complicated than this obvious point. So I am interested to see what they do with it. But I think these 2 foot soldiers who were obviously slaughtering, killing, and fighting mindlessly almost are going to have to explore the damage of what they've done in a very real and grounded way to people they've just harmed. And I'm sure these villagers have more to them than just being innocent villagers. So I think they're going to have to explore this village and be at the mercy of the people they just had no mercy for. And I think that's going to be very interesting to explore. But I also think it sheds some light on Gobble Girl. I think this is a very far prediction, but I do think her idea of killing everyone in the village, because really Asa wants to, is going to be explored a little bit. I think her definition of innocence are people who literally couldn't have been capable of doing anything about the situation they were in, but the adults of this generation might know more than we thought. They might be living a lie on purpose, and that may be unacceptable to a character like her. she might think that anybody who does nothing while seeing evil, is maybe something worth exploring. I'm interested to see where they go with that because I think this village has a lot more layers than lets on. I think there's a very good chance that there's a good reason why people who are destined for chaotic destruction might need to be contained. Mm. And I also think, now that I'm thinking about this in real time, because it seems pretty clear to me that like the mystery old man that's in charge of Asa's group almost is guaranteed to be her father, right? Like he takes her out of the village, sneaks her out. He can only take one of the sons or one of the children, which is the daughter. And, they go on to form a hatred for the village that may or may not be justified entirely based on their unique perspective, right? Especially if the mom died because of some ambiguous reason that was a judgment call. So yeah, I think everyone's about to start exploring their respective worlds. I think our main cast is going to explore the broader world of this third party group, which is apparently aligned with the village, but not quite what the village is. We're going to watch Asa take a look at some of these, more nuanced takes as they watch their friend recover. And I think these foot soldiers are going to have to re explore the village they just came from, even if they have to take the uniforms off and pretend to just be hikers or something. I don't know what they're going to have to pull, but I think there's going to be a very interesting dynamic as they have to re explore the world they just jumped into. Now, one other thing, because they can't pull the wool over my eyes, y'all are going to find out I'm the sharpest tool in the tool shed. But, is I think there's still a mystery behind the nature of Asa's power specifically, because this is this show is called Diamonds of the Shadow Realm, not of the Sunlight Realm. And I think because our main character is very clearly powered by the light half of this dynamic, I don't know exactly what the darkness in Asa represents. And the fact that we haven't actually seen her power directly still has me kind of squinting at her nature. Not that I think she might be his real brother, but I think her motivations and her nature and the reason she was rescued over the brother. I think all of those things are still going to come into play, possibly. Whether that's because the light brother is probably bringing positivity, and maybe the world doesn't know what to do with the darkness, and that's why the dad saved her. Or if the dad is power hungry and darkness is much easier to manipulate than light, who knows? But I do think there's going to be a very interesting revelation about Asa's powers because they're the only thing that are still hidden by a rainbow effect. It seems like this show is very good at keeping things invisible until it's time to reveal them. But yeah, Asa actually never gets shown for what is her power. And I think the complexities of war are even on display in this show in a very unique kind of way. I think that's definitely going to be explored. I had a very strong feeling that this raid on the village was really, really reminiscent of like the Ishvalan War, but we're watching it from the perspective of someone like Scar or something. Like this is a very complicated, nuanced situation that has a real obvious damage and implications in direct ways. And so the closer you are to the damage, the less justifiable these kind of calamities can even seem is also something that I think is going to be very interesting. So no, I'm very, very curious to see how this gets explored, how this gets navigated, but I am along for this ride because I think this show specifically has the potential to make some noise in a way that I think has been, I don't want to say gone for a long time in anime. There's been some bangers that have come out since then, but I think this is going to be something special because this is maybe half riding off the credibility of somebody who makes things that are special, but also, yeah, 2 or 3 episodes into a show, you can usually know what you're in for. And I think we're in for a very, very capable show. So yeah, stick around if you like it. Also, let me know what you think. This is just the first 2 episodes. I'm always going to do 2 episodes at a time on this show. So let me know what you think about these 2 episodes. Make sure and watch it for yourself. Comment if you disagree or if you have any thoughts that I might have missed in this show, because I definitely didn't cover everything. And yeah, I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.